Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I am your host, Lori LeBay, and I am thrilled you could join us today. If you liked our opening music, it's called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band, and you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. For those of you that are new, Alzheimer Speaks is about raising all voices, big and small, all around the world. We are about sound news, not just sound bites, and we would love for you to be part of that conversation if you've got a story to tell. So just reach out to me at radio@alzheimerspeaks.com. I'm going to do a couple of shout outs before we talk about going down the rabbit hole with our guest today. So first, I want to give a big shout out to Dementia Map. If you haven't checked us out, please do so. Go to dementiamap.com. We are building a global resource directory for basically everything dementia. For those of you looking for support, on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month at 1 p.m. Central, so that would be 2 o'clock Eastern Time, I do a memory cafe, which is sponsored by Arthur's Memory Care and Arthur's Senior Living. And you are more than welcome to join us. We do that virtually. And then on the last Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. Central, Brookdale North Oaks sponsors a Caregiver Connect. This month we will be meeting virtually, but next month in May, we hope to be in person and back up to having respite care for your loved one as well. Now, there's some exciting news. There's 2 opportunities for people who are working in the dementia arena. Maud's Awards is open for applications, and you can win $5,000 as an individual or up to $25,000 as an organization for the work you've already done. And that application is open until May 16th. In addition, they also have Maud's Ventures, which has 3 design awards, which gives seed money, $50,000 to $100,000 per design. And you can find out more about that at maudsventures.org. And then many people are interested in Dale Brennison's work, Dr. Dale Brennison's work, and the Dementia Summit, which is going to be held by Central Minnesota's Dementia Community Action Network, known as DCAN, is going to have him live and also virtually on May 12th, and that is free. We are now going to hear from the Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner as they talk about the footbar walker, and we'll be right back.
I love the footbar walker, and let me tell you why. It is the option for my toolbox that I've been waiting for. Let's be honest, there are some clients who, despite our best rehab efforts, just aren't able to return to performing a sit-to-stand transfer on their own. Now I can offer my caregivers an easier, safer option that doesn't involve hoisting their loved one up from a sitting position. I don't recommend this walker for all of my clients, but I do recommend this walker for those caregivers looking for an easier, safer option with transfers. I would also encourage other therapists to add this walker to their toolbox. It's kind of like having my own mobile parallel bars for the client to pull up on. Whether it's a family caregiver at home helping a loved one with Parkinson's or dementia, CNAs in a long-term care facility assisting their patients, or therapists adapting to client and caregiver-specific needs, we now have a very safe and effective option to offer in the footbar walker. Check this product out at thefootbarwalker.com. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
Okay, it is time to introduce our guest right now. And again, we are going to be talking with the author of Down the Rabbit Hole, A Journey Through End-Stage Dementia. And Ms. Zyss began writing after her husband's death. And at first, it was just to kind of make sense of her own feelings. And then the book turned out to be very cathartic for her. She was able to express her feelings and come to terms with them. And she thought she might even be able to help others. And that she has. Since her book has been endorsed and published globally, she has appeared on Alzheimer's podcast as a guest author. So today we are going to explore her journey. Well, Veronika, I'm so excited to have you here to talk about your book. I think it's a fabulous, and I just realized you're part of the Alz authors, which I just adore. They do such a wonderful job with having over, I think it's 300 authors now that have written on this subject, which is so valuable, not only to family, but to professionals as well. So thank you for taking the time. I know writing a book, and here it is right here. Writing a book is not an easy thing to do, and it's a very time consuming. I've thought about it myself, and I still haven't done it yet after all these years. So thank you for the work and time you put into that. I'm thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
So what made you start writing? You know, I had mentioned in the intro, you know, it was kind of probably more for yourself originally. What did you find in that process in terms of writing?
Before my husband died, he was sick for many, many years with different types of dementia. You can get it much earlier and it lasts much longer. We were both falling apart. And what got me writing, it was about 2 years after he died, after we had the memorial. I couldn't shake the guilt. It was just like all-consuming guilt. I felt that, you know, I failed as his wife, as his caregiver. I felt guilty for wishing he had died sooner, for not being able to cope. He wanted to stay at home until the end. So he did until the last 2 months of his life. And then it was in ICU and intensive care. But I was a total wreck. And I started writing things down, not knowing it would be a book. And I, started throwing out stuff, emptying the file cabinets. And I found notes from him to me. And that's what started the book. But it was basically about my guilt. And as I was writing it, I realized he had incredible guilt too. We were both guilty of the same thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought once it started coming out, I thought, well, if I can share it with anybody, maybe it would help somebody not feel as bad as I'm feeling. And what's funny is after the book was written and I sat down and read it from beginning to end very slowly, it was cathartic. It started to work. Mm-hmm. It started to work. It started to ease the guilt because I realized I am feeling guilty, but there's really not that much reason to. You do at the time, you do the best you can with what you have. And that's what occurred to me after reading it.
And I think that that's pretty common for people. I mean, we build up that we're supposed to be this superhero. We love somebody, we care for them, and so we should know how to do this. And there's no training, and most of us get very little for resources. And most family and friends don't understand really what you're going through. So your support services, that you've had all your life kind of go by the wayside. And I find it really interesting that you ran across his notes of guilt, because I think that is something that most people don't even consider that they could process that. And I hear that from people living with dementia all the time. They worry about their care partner. They can see what it's doing to their lives and how it's changed and how stressed someone is. And, they don't want that for their loved one who's caring for them.
It is true. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, when you titled the book Down the Rabbit Hole, A Journey Through End Stage Dementia. How did you come up with the title?
Alice in Wonderland, down the
Okay.
rabbit hole. You sink and everything's crazy. Everything's upside down. Nothing means anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we were living through the last few years of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was upside down. It was like we were Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
So I borrowed the title.
Well, and down the rabbit hole, I mean, everybody knows pretty much what that means, in terms of feeling out of control and out of whack with things. How would you describe your book if you were trying to pitch it to somebody? Someone asked you, if I pick up your book, what am I going to find in it?
Okay. Well, I would first say it's a true story. It's about us, but I've removed us so that I can be more objective and I could put in things that I wouldn't talk to family or friends or children about. So it is a true story. It shows the impact that dementia has on both the husband and the wife, on both people. We were living at home alone, so we didn't have children at home with us at the time. It was our story. And basically, the book, it's different from conventional novels or books about dementia. A good example is Still Alice, one of my favorite books on the subject. Hers is a personal journey. It's written as a personal journey. With this book, I've written it from both sides, from what I was experiencing and at the same time what he was experiencing in his words. His words are all bold typing, so it's not hard to figure out who's talking. It shows two different realities occupying the same time period where everything totally becomes distorted. Nothing makes sense. It makes sense to him, and I'm left not making sense. My husband was a high functioning executive, and he could fake being sentient, fake not having the disease. Mind you, we didn't know until 6 months before he died what it was, but he could fake it really, really well. And so the book just describes the faking. It shows the same reality from two different perspectives.
And what exactly was his diagnosis?
He had a deteriorating spine, and when he was a young child, he had many head traumas. So we thought the doctors, he was on high levels of pain medication, all sorts of narcotics, and he thought that the problem was the drugs, and he couldn't go off the drugs or he'd be in so much pain he'd want to commit suicide. Even the psychiatrist in the pain management clinic agreed with him. We had no idea. He was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia, and that is different from all the different types of dementia, PICs, Alzheimer's. They all have their own set of problems. With frontal temporal, you can get it as early as 35 years of age, and it changes your personality, and you have no inhibition controls. It just wipes out normal reasoning. You can still function, you know what's going on, but it slowly wipes stuff out. So you have, when you're interacting with people, you don't know what proper is and what isn't proper. It takes that away. And he also, just before the end, the doctor said it's probably also ALS. And we were shocked. We were diagnosed in December 23rd. He died June 15th. And at the time, we had no idea it would be that fast, that he was at the end of his disease.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot. And yet your assumptions were, and yours and the doctor's assumptions made total sense in terms of, if it was the medications, that can always, I shouldn't say always, but that can cause some of those symptoms and things. In terms of personality changes, was there anything that stood out that was really, really difficult for you to accept as a whole?
Yeah. The man I knew slowly disappeared, but it happened so slowly. It's so insidious that you don't realize when it's happening. You think that they're being mean, they're being unreasonable, they're picking on you. He's changing. You think, well, I married one guy, now I've got, somebody else. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I'm thinking, well, is he an abuser? Like, I didn't see this, like, what's going on? Or, you lots of things happen. But he changed. I thought, I'll give you an example. We were away and we were in the room, and he went to we were in a hotel room, and he went to turn the air conditioning up or down. I don't remember. And he's standing over the window where the hotel air conditioning is. You press the buttons, and he froze. And after a few minutes, I went over, I shook him, and I said, well, are you doing the air conditioning? Are you coming to bed? He froze. He was frozen for about 10 or 15 minutes. When he came to, and I told him, he told me I was imagining it, that I was crazy. So things like that. There were physical symptoms. He couldn't see them. I tried telling him, and it was me. I was imagining. So that the personality, the man I married was not the man that he was becoming. And he really honestly believed I was the one that was changing. It was hard.
Wow. Now, did you have children together?
He had 4 children of his own. He's from England. The kids are there. When I married him, I had a small child. So we raised my son. My son was our son. And so we had the one. Now, one thing we did learn, and my husband was very, very close to our son, and he had basically pretended that they were a genetic bond. And I was the outsider. I was the wicked stepmother. It's funny. We'd go on holiday wherever, and I was the wicked stepmother. They were, Daddy and Josh. When he was diagnosed in December, after we came home, we came home in the afternoon, close to midnight, we were both in shock. He started talking to me, and he said, "This is the first time in my life I am so grateful that our son doesn't have a genetic bond." He was just so grateful. And then because I guess, he was a very smart man. He understood genetics. I didn't know until later. I started reading up on it. And there's a 30 to 40% chance that you will inherit it. He inherited from his father, but at the time they didn't have the label. He just saw how his father died and acted, and it was exactly the same way as him. Wow. We do know there's a genetic component, but it was amazing that he had such clarity, and he was so grateful that our son was not his. Whereas for years and years and years, decades, it was Daddy and Josh. Yeah.
Wow. What about his children in England? Are they getting tested to see if they have the genetic genes at all? Or
I called one of his relatives and let them know, and asked if they would contact the mother. And I left it at that. Nobody's called me, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I left it in their hands.
Yep. Which is understandable.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
No. And I was thinking about that, and about, our son. And, our son is now a doctor. He's a medical doctor in Los Angeles. But he, we were talking, and, I was thinking years have passed, would he want to know? And he said, if he had thought that he had it and he would be starting to change at around age 35, he doesn't know if he would have gone through university, finished medical school, and done everything, or if he would just live life and enjoy the moment. So there is a component there. Is it, do you want to know or don't you?
Yeah. And I've asked that question to a lot of doctors, and and I would say 90% have said no, they wouldn't. because just because you have the gene doesn't mean it's going to mutate in any certain fashion. There's odds, but it will affect your life. Once you know.
I think I wouldn't want to know.
You what?
I wouldn't want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm the same way. My mom had dementia for 30 years. And so she started having symptoms in her mid 50s. And, I'm 63 or will be 63 in a couple of months. And, people have asked me that. And I just said, no, I'm just going to kind of keep living my life. I'll be watching out. I'll be conscious of it, and I've noticed changes with myself in terms of word find and things like that. But I've also noticed that all my friends are going through the same thing, and it hasn't disrupted my life yet. So we'll see what happens, with it. My mom's brother, he didn't have dementia, and he lived a nice long life too. So it's hard to say. My cousins, I haven't heard anything from them, or my brothers at this point. So you just don't know. And
agreed. This way, by not knowing, you can achieve your potential. By knowing you might have it, even if you never get it, but you might have the gene, which won't express itself. You don't live the life you could have lived.
Yep, exactly. So, well, that's interesting. I think that's a question a lot of families don't even discuss in terms of, taking a genetic test. And then I've heard other people who have actually taken a genetic test thinking maybe that they had something else, and then it's popped up that they have, the gene for dementia, and then they're shocked, and they didn't have any counseling before they kind of took this home test and stuff too. And that's one of the things that I hear people say, if you are going to do testing, make sure you do the counseling with it, so that you fully understand, what you're dealing with there.
Yes.
Was there one chapter in the book that was more difficult for you to write than not?
Yes, it was. The book starts off at his funeral, at his memorial funeral, and then it goes and it describes what death looked like. And it's right at the beginning. The very beginning of the book is the worst part of the book. If people don't want to read really horrible detail, miss the first 30 pages, just skip. The part that was the hardest was describing him in delirium. He was sleeping and he didn't wake up. I remember he was at home. He wanted to be at home until the end, and he had days when he was normal, and then there were days when he was off the wall. And on normal days, he'd say, "Let me stay at home, let me die at home," and I'd agree. And I think as long as you're not violent and you're not too destructive, we can manage it. So we were both in that stage. But the hardest part was describing what emergency and ICU looks like when you're in the hospital and you're unprepared because suddenly the person that you're with doesn't wake up. They're in delirium, which means their eyes are open, their mouth is open, they're screaming like you're vivisecting them, and there's nothing you can do. And the hospital can't drug them because the hospital wants to see what the tests are, what the results are. Are there any drugs there that shouldn't be? So you have this person, and then when they realize what's going on, they do medicate them, but they're still in that delirium. That was the hardest, was describing every detail. But I felt I had to get it out. When we asked the doctors and the psychiatrist, and even, in the hospital, when I asked, how do we know when it's the end? How long does it take? What does death look like? Nobody would say anything. And so I described the most painful part as vividly as I could.
Yeah. And And, the journey of death is so different for every individual. It's hard. I would imagine it is very hard, but as a family member going through that, you do want answers. You want to know what to look for. You want to be able to pace yourself kind of and know where you sit in the process, because it is so exhausting, and it is, it's scary, and there's so many feelings, just swirling around, within you. I remember when my dad was dying, and they gave us the little, hospice book, the little blue book, to kind of guide us. And I knew my dad's body was shutting down. I could tell his breathing. And my brother's like, "Where's the book? Where's the book?" And it's like, I think Mom grabbed it. I think it's downstairs, and so he went down, and, my dad really at that point just had minutes left. The book wasn't going to help, but you want that something concrete, if it's a voice telling you or if it's something written, and it just doesn't work like that. Death doesn't cooperate in okay, this is exactly how you're going to exit. Though I'm sure you had information in generalities that they gave you. We all kind of want a timeline.
Well, actually, at that time, this was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't.
Okay.
They didn't in emergency. They didn't in ICU. They didn't anywhere, which was surprising. There was no. The last day, the last hour he was alive. Like you'd go into the hospital. You could be there 24 hours a day if you wanted. I'd go. I'd read to him. He liked Jeffrey Archer, so I'd read Jeffrey Archer's. After a while, I was too exhausted to read, so I sat there, and I regret that now. I sat there. I didn't even hold his hand. I was just too tired, just sitting there. Totally, all my words were spent. And the very last day I went to see him, I think it was 4 or 5 in the morning, and something had changed. He was breathing very, very badly, like trying to breathe. And he was down to no weight. He was totally emaciated from starving for 35 days. And I asked the nurse, I said, "Can you give him something to and she said, "No, that'll stop his breathing." And I said, "Well, how long can he suffer? How long can he try gasping for breath? He's not there anymore." Yeah. "Oh, it'll take 2 or 3 days." So I begged for morphine, like an overdose for anything. Like I begged for 2 months. Nobody gave him anything. But that was awful. And so I left him. I left him right away. And before I left him, when the nurse wouldn't give him anything, I begged him to die, and I gave him permission to die. Then I begged the nurse some more. Then I went home because our son was home for medical school to be with Daddy. I went home to wake him up to bring him, and I thought we'd spend the 2 or 3 days in the hospital. One of us would be there every second. By the time I got home, the phone was ringing. The hospital called, "He's dead." So it's too bad that they can't say, he'll last maybe an hour or less. I would have stayed and held his hand, but 2 or 3 days, you figure you'll go home, between you and your son, between the two of us, we'll always be there so he doesn't die alone. And we missed it.
Wow. That's sad, because that wasn't that long ago for them not to have given you some guidance in the hospital. That is absolutely ridiculous, because that information has been around, or that they didn't, even, did they discuss hospice with you at all?
No, not at all. No, because they just, all they did was say, if you put in a feeding tube, he can last up to 30 days. Without a feeding tube, he'll go within 7 to 10. The 7 to 10 turned into 35 days.
Wow.
They gave him water, solid water in a spoon that he could suck up. But it just went on and on and on, and he lost weight, and nobody would tell us anything. There was no hospice. And and the thing I kept, begging was, more drugs, because he was, if you're narcotic naive, which means you're not accustomed to narcotics, very little narcotics can stop your breathing. If you've been on narcotics for 10 years and you have higher and higher doses of them, fentanyl, hydromorphone, like all of it diluted, he was on heavy masses of drugs for pain, prescription drugs only for pain. So he had a high tolerance. So whatever they were giving him wasn't enough to stop the pain. So he was still in pain, but he was trapped inside his body, growling from the pain. And every time I begged them, oh no, we'll stop his breathing. And I'm thinking, like, that would be better.
Yeah, that would be a gift. Yeah.
That would be a kindness.
Oh my gosh. That is so sad. But what really makes it sad too is that as individuals, as family members, we think when we go to the hospital, when we're talking to the doctors, that they get everything a family is going through, not just the patient, but just, and that they understand and that they would give you the information to be able to make choices. Because I can't imagine, I just can't imagine being you watching that over and over and knowing that he's in pain and knowing that no one wants to help, and just put him through that suffering. That's just sad. I know that I learned during my journey to call in a patient advocate. And I don't even remember where I learned that, but there was one time when my dad was dying. He had brain cancer and he was in the hospital, and we went to visit him. And about 2 weeks earlier, I had a dream of my dad being really gaunt. And at that point, he was really healthy, and it didn't make any sense. But he ended up landing in the hospital, and I go to see him, and he is just. And I was there the night before and he was fine. But that morning he was just totally sucked in, his whole face. He barely had any color and he was gaunt. He couldn't communicate. He couldn't open his eyes. And I talked to the nurse and I said, something's wrong. And she's like, no, this is normal. I'm like, this is not normal. And I said, something's wrong with him. And she just kept putting it off. The doctor, he'll be in, and I'm like, he needs another scan. He needs a doctor. He needs somebody paying attention to him. And she just kept blowing it off. And I went down to the patient advocate, and they actually got another. I said, I want a second opinion. I said, because, excuse my language, I said, this is bullshit. I know my dad, and this isn't normal, and this isn't how he looked yesterday. And there's no reason he should have failed that much overnight. And so they get another doctor up there, and they look through the chart, and his doctor late the night before took him off a medication to prevent his brain from swelling, cold turkey. And this second opinion said, you never do that. Never, ever do you take somebody off cold turkey. They gave him a shot, and in 20 minutes, he was sitting up watching a basketball game. And the guy who did the second opinion said he would have been dead if you would have called. But, we don't know that as family. We don't know that there's other people we can maybe call in. And then, in some cases, there's nobody to call in. And it's a horrible feeling when you know in your gut what's going on. And, you know your loved one. So I just I'm sorry you went through that. And I'm sorry there wasn't more support. Even in emergency and ICU, they should still be talking about, palliative care and hospice. I mean, when you're in there, those are major decisions that families need to know about and be educated on.
Yeah, well, I just wanted him to be medicated so he would be out of pain, and nobody would do it.
Yep.
Nobody would do it. And that's the sad part.
Yeah.
And they had his surviving power of attorney, so that from 20 years ago, from 10 years ago, from 6 months ago, and I brought in all the originals to make sure no life-saving measures. And nobody listened. They said, well, he's got dementia. We don't listen to that. But here it is from before dementia. I brought everything in. It's sad. It's sad, but they couldn't make him comfortable enough, because then they would have stopped his breathing. Well, at this point, when you're in pain, you don't have your body, your mind is going, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's horrible to watch somebody in pain like that. I had an uncle in the hospital, and his wife and his daughters were sitting there, but they were so shocked. He went into the hospital. He only ended up lasting a few days, and so they were just grieving, and they couldn't sense his pain, but I could literally feel his pain. And I told the nurse, he needs more medication. This is ridiculous, because you'd see him clutching his chest in pain, and they were really good, thank God, about doing that, because it was, as somebody watching that, I mean, you're feeling their pain, and none of us want to live in pain like that. None of us. I mean, that's just like you said, why make somebody suffer in terms of that? But there are, like you said, you can bring in the documents, and doctors still can argue against them, which is kind of like, my head, like, then what are we doing the documents for if you don't have to follow the rules? To me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Yeah.
And I think that they need a little bit more education. And I understand that they take an oath, to help people live, but there comes a point in time where we're all going to exit this planet, and we should be able to do that in a dignified manner too. And,
painless. Yeah, painless.
And not in pain like that. I just unbelievable. Wow. Well, I think your book has so many enlightening chapters. I like how you share kind of the two realities that exist, because a lot of times I think as family members, we think it's just our reality, and they have their own thoughts, but we don't look at the depth that their thoughts and what they're perceiving is truly their reality.
Yes.
What they're feeling and seeing, and it's just as strong as our reality. It's just in a whole nother realm, and can cause a lot of conflict and emotions with that. So I think that that's really neat that you honored that in the journey. And I would think, did that bring you some peace in finding those notes?
I started reading them. There were nasty notes as well, but there were the ones where he's apologizing and whatever. The notes, they helped. They really, really helped. It was in his handwriting, I guess. I don't know when he was doing them over the course of a year or whatever, long before he was diagnosed. He was writing stuff and squirreling it away in the cabinet, because he knew I never went in the filing cabinet. But his filing cabinet, not mine. But it did make me feel better. But right after he died, for the 2 years before I started writing, I even went to his psychiatrist asking for help. I probably had a form of PTSD, stress, who knows what it was. I just couldn't function. I just, couldn't function. It was hard. And I thought before then, when he's gone and the stress is over, I can relax, I can sleep. After he died, there was no reprieve. There was nothing. There wasn't sleep. I was still on full speed. So it was hard, but yes, the notes did help.
Yeah. Did you kind of loop and keep reliving things?
No.
Okay.
No. A couple of things stayed in my mind. I couldn't get them out of my mind. I'll share one with you. After he was diagnosed, he begged to go to Cuba one last time to Cuba. And my son said, absolutely not. Don't put him on a plane. You don't want to put a patient in a different surrounding. I didn't understand. I really didn't. I was like stressed out. So he bugged me. After 3 months, I couldn't take the fighting, the everyday fighting. I thought, they're wrong. He doesn't have frontal temporal lobe. He doesn't have dementia. It's just the drugs. It's the ALS. And I'll give him the holiday. I couldn't fight with him one more day. So we went to Sandals and I went horseback riding. I asked him, do you want me to take you to to the restaurant in the morning for breakfast. No, honey. And he was all happy. No, honey, I love you. Have fun. Don't hurry back. And he had his walker and he had his wheelchair because he was having mobility issues. And I also asked at the front desk if they could send somebody to the room to check up on him in case he wasn't going out for breakfast. So off I went for 2 hours, 2.5 at the most, with his blessing. I came back. The room was ripped apart. He's on the floor screaming at me that I tried to kill him. And apparently he got himself to the front desk with his walker and he wrote a note that I was trying to kill him. And he made sure they photocopied it 5 times. And they gave it to everybody at the front desk. And he had 1 copy for me. I mean, it was that I cannot get that scene out of my mind. That is still looped in my mind. But other less significant ones, no, I've just let go. I've totally let go.
Yeah.
Oh
my goodness. That's a big one, and then when you're out of the country and you're like, what's going to happen? With the accusations. Oh my goodness.
Well, they were, smart enough to know it wasn't real. And I asked a doctor and I had the doctor there talk to the psychiatrist here. And they kind of sorted it out and got us on a plane and coming back home. But we have to medicate him so he wouldn't be disruptive on the plane. It was a nightmare. But, I have no idea where that came from, because before I left that morning to go horseback riding, he was very nice. Yeah. And when we got home, he denied it all. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. FTD is definitely a challenging, disease. There's no getting around that. And most people don't understand that because people don't talk about it, because it is bizarre. And I think some people think, oh, you've got to be making that up. How could that be? And it's like, well, walk in my shoes. Just a day and test the waters. But yeah, there's not a whole lot you can do to control, those things. And what I've heard, because I haven't experienced it firsthand, is like, you never know when it's going to happen either, when the tide's going to shift.
Oh yeah, you can be, Dr. Jekyll 1 minute, and in the same sentence before you finish the sentence, you've turned into Mr. Hyde. Full steam. You don't know. And then a second later, you're back to being nice and you're telling the person they're crazy. They're imagining it. You would never do such a thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Did you find that he did that with other people as well? Or was it pretty much the two of you the majority of the time?
He only interacted with doctors and the doctors didn't know he had mental illness. The neighbors, they'd say hi, or I'd have them over for an early dinner and he'd excuse himself and he'd be, tired. But I got the worst of it. One of his doctors, we were at the pain clinic. He was having a procedure in his back. It's like they give you an epidural for pain every few months. And this was a doctor, surgeon, at the pain clinic, and he had seen him for a few years, and we're going in. And all of a sudden he says to the guy, I don't want this. I want a different procedure. And he starts arguing with the doctor. And the doctor picked up there was something wrong, but did not. Like, I know the doctor didn't see dementia. The doctor just said, you're abusive. I'm the physician. I don't need you as my patient if you're behaving this way. And he just started to go nuts. And he's on the table ready to be, anesthetized, to have the procedure. And the doctor is arguing, like he's arguing with the doctor. And the doctor is like, get out of here. Like, and I thought very quickly, and I said to him, you're so brilliant. You're such a brilliant man, to my husband. The doctor is here. The operating room is here. Everything's waiting for you. Why don't you hold the mirror and tell the doctor what to do, and he can do what you want. You can hold the mirror. The doctor looked at me seriously for a minute and then just about peed laughing. And then my husband calmed down and apologized to the doctor, apologized for his wife being so horrible, and said, I'm ready to have the procedure. I'm sorry for my wife, doctor. I'm ready to go ahead. But that was a glimpse into, yes, he can be abusive to other people, but they're not around enough.
Yeah.
He had the procedure. He went home. Nobody knew at that time he had dementia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And to balance that out, I've heard many individuals who have gotten divorced over the behavior changes because, they didn't have a diagnosis and, they didn't understand what was going on. And I think that that's very common out there.
We talked about it. We did a couple of years before we talked about it. And we both agreed that we'd both go to the same psychiatrist, have the psychiatrist talk to us. And then he agreed with me that he would take some antidepressants or anything to mellow him out. And then I wouldn't divorce him. But we did talk. We had that divorce discussion.
Yeah.
We came up with a solution, but at the time we just thought it was pain and he needed a caregiver for pain. And I said, in order to remain, I need you to be less, don't know what the word is, disruptive, nasty. And so, antidepressants, they worked for a while.
Yeah. Everything works for a while, it
Yeah.
seems like, and then, but then it's important to go in and get adjustments and things. Well, I can see, your book is very different from others because the way you write, it is very authentic and it is raw and it is honest. And I think people need to hear that side. So I appreciate you again, being brave enough to do that, because that's a big thing, to share your life in that way with people and, your true story. Because I'm sure some people will judge, who haven't been through it and say, well, that's not happened to me. Well, maybe your person doesn't have what my loved one had either. All of that stuff makes a difference. Did you find in publishing at all, I've heard this from people with dementia, that sometimes when they are telling their stories, let's say on Facebook, earlier in their journey and stuff, where they get bullied, where people say, that's you're faking it, that can't be.
No, what I got the opposite. Two people come to mind on Facebook Messenger. I got a messenger message because, I'm open on Messenger. My name is there so they can message me even if they're not my friend. One lady said, "Thank you for talking about guilt, for wishing him dead, and for everything you've done." She said she read my book. She picked it up in the library, read it, and she couldn't put it down. And she said she couldn't tell her doctor or her children or her family that she wanted her husband dead. He was just so hard. And she thanked me for being brave, and that normalized her feelings. And then later another man messaged me. He had bought the book or picked it up somewhere. And he thanked me as well for releasing him from his guilt. He couldn't talk about it to anybody, but when he saw it in black and white, it validated his feelings. So I got good responses.
Great. I'm glad, because I do think that we can teach and kind of lift one another up through storytelling, because we all have different journeys and so many of us don't want to share our stories. And so when you don't share your story, then you keep yourself kind of isolated and alone. And one of the things that I have heard over and over since stepping into this space is what a difference it is to not feel alone. That in and of itself is so empowering and so healing.
Yeah. One thing I would highly recommend to anybody that's dealing with dementia, go to a dementia support group. If you're a caregiver, go to a group where you and your loved one are in a group with other people, caregivers, and their whoever they're looking after. Join a group. It's really, really important. We did that very briefly at the end, and it really, really helped. We didn't know about it earlier, but when we found out about it, I had to talk him into it. And he wouldn't go. I bullied him into it. But it helped me. It really helped me. And I saw in him, even though he didn't want to participate in the group, it helped him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The memory cafes for people with dementia and their loved ones or care partners, um, they're fabulous. There's over 1,000 of them out there that we know of. You can go to memorycafedirectory.com to find those. Some have gone virtual, like I do one the second and the fourth Wednesday of each month, and we have stayed virtual, and the group has decided to do that. Um, but there are plenty of others that are now open back up and gathering again. And just the friendships that are developed are so close. The safety that they give each other, the permission to just be who they are, and no one have to worry about how anyone's acting or reacting. Everybody just gets it. And yeah, very, very powerful.
I wish we had known about it. We would have gone 2 years sooner, but we weren't diagnosed. It's something that's invaluable.
Exactly.
And I also learned coping skills when I went, coping skills, what to do at home to calm the person down, so it was really important.
Yeah. Well, and they teach each other to take care of themselves as well, giving permission that it is okay for, you to go get your hair cut or your nails done or grocery shopping or just take a nap, and try to pull in help and things too, which I think is really good. Veronika, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, this I've learned over the past years. When a person first dies, you can choose to stay in your guilt, to stay miserable, to just stay where you are and not have a life. Or as the surviving person, you can pick yourself up and go on. I've learned that, with time, it's easier to get rid of the really, really bad memories and just try to remember who you married, what the good was, and hang on to that and try to remember them the way they were, not what they became. So I'd like to share that. I think that's important. So you don't get stuck in a hell of your own making. There is life after death. There is life. You can choose to have a good life, or you can choose to wallow in depression. That's I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree. I call something tears, fears, and joy. And the tears are for the person that we lost and that we want back. And, I found myself going down the rabbit hole in feeling bad for all the loss. But then I realized, which I think ties into what you're saying, that, you couldn't hurt so bad if you didn't love so deeply to begin with. And, where was that love? It was through those good times. And that just kind of pulled me out of the rabbit hole and said, in a really strange way, how lucky am I to have loved that deeply? Because some people never love that deeply to hurt that bad, as well in that whole process there. So, I would encourage people, go and get this book, Down the Rabbit Hole, A Journey Through End-Stage Dementia by Veronika Zyss. And that she spells Veronika with a K, not a C. And Zyss is Zyss. And you can also email her at veronika@rogers, that's plural.com. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Veronika. This was an important conversation. I think so many people struggle with caring and guilt and loss and so many different things. And your authenticity and your willingness to share so openly is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for our audience, we always encourage you to like, click, and share. Don't keep nuggets to yourself. Pass them along. Somebody else needs them too. Take care. We'll talk to you next time.
Well, hi, I'm Lori LeBay, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer's Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.